In late July, the United Arab Emirates and the Israeli regime celebrated what they described as a historic organ transplant exchange. In less than a year after the normalization of relations between Abu Dhabi and Tel Aviv, an Israeli woman donated a kidney to a patient in the UAE as part of a new cross-border organ donation program. Then a woman in Abu Dhabi underwent surgery to donate her kidney to a woman in Haifa. Yet, regardless of this publicity blitz, both the Emiratis and Israelis have a shady track record when it comes to organ transplant, or in better words, organ trafficking.
الحادث اللي حدث مؤلم جدا لجميع السعوديين.
Back in 2009, New Jersey FBI agents arrested an Orthodox rabbi by the name of Levi Isaac Rosenbaum for organ trafficking. He was running for years an international web of outlaw transplant surgeons, lawyers, and kidney hunters with a focus on Israeli customers. But Rosenbaum was just the tip of the proverbial iceberg. The same year, the Swedish tabloid Aftonbladet published a controversial article which revealed a horrifying truth. Israeli soldiers harvested organs from Palestinians who had died in their custody. 3 years later, in just another case, an Israeli citizen by the name of Moshe Harel was arrested for masterminding an illegal organ trade involving a clinic in the Kosovan capital, Pristina.
Well, the Israelis have a well-documented history of organ theft, organ trade and organ trafficking. In fact, they are one of the world leaders in what is known as the red market, which is multi-billion trade in illegally trafficked organs.
At the same time, the United Arab Emirates is also accused of being involved in organ trafficking, especially in recent years and amidst political chaos in war-torn countries such as Yemen, Libya, and Syria, where Abu Dhabi has had a subversive role to play. In June last year, Orchid, an orphan care organization in Syria, released a long report about 36 Syrian kids who fell victim to organ trafficking inside the UAE. Ironically, some independent journalists believe that Orchid itself is involved in one way or another in this dirty business, questioning the organization's report as a naming names tactic to eliminate the rivals.
Well, I mean, I didn't have much time to research the entire connection between Orchid Syria Association. But the fact that this organization, when I looked at its Facebook page, it looks very similar to me to the organizations that are actually involved in child abduction, child trafficking, and by default, organ trafficking. I can't say that definitively. But the organization in their report, which by the way has been removed from the internet, try to shift blame onto, for example, the Kurdish separatist forces, onto the Syrian Arab army forces.
These children were reportedly transferred by the Red Cross from a refugee camp in Syria to the UAE after a series of medical tests, including blood typing. According to the same report, the Syrian Democratic Forces kidnapped a number of Syrian children from refugee camps in areas under their control in northern Syria before selling them to well-off families in the UAE. Moreover, by some credible accounts, the white helmets operating in terrorist-controlled parts of Syria are seriously accused of being involved in forcible removal of organs from Syrians living there.
These accusations against the White Helmets have never been addressed. A public inquiry has never been instigated into their activities. And of course, the important point to make is that their founder, who was a former British military intelligence officer, was involved in Kosovo in 1999. He worked in Pristina under Bernard Kouchner, the founder of Médecins Sans Frontières, or Doctors Without Borders, and former French foreign minister. Now, during that time, Le Mesurier was responsible for the transformation of the Kosovo Liberation Army into the Kosovo Security Corps. And during that time, the KLA, which was Albanian warlords and Al-Qaeda factions, were proven to be responsible for trafficking majority Serbian children for organ trafficking.
According to the director of the Russian Foundation for the Study of Democracy, Maxim Grigoriev, the White Helmets were a key element in this illegal scheme of organ removal. We learned about those incidents from the people whom we interviewed. Close ties between the White Helmets and the Emiratis raise even more suspicions about the involvement of Abu Dhabi in organ trafficking.
Look, the UAE is working hand in hand with Israel, particularly in Yemen. The UAE is in charge of the torture facilities in southern Yemen, where it is carrying out some of the most heinous atrocities against Yemeni civilians through torture. I think a report came out around 2 years ago on that. The UAE also, of course, we can't forget, again, the connection to the White Helmets, because James Le Mesurier, who is the founder of the White Helmets, who was also former British military intelligence, he was working for a UK Foreign Office outreach agent at the time, or MI6 agency, I would say, at the time when he founded the White Helmets. But he also worked, for example, for Good Harbor International, which was established by Richard Clarke, the George Bush administration, who provided cover for the 9/11 events, who set up his organization in UAE.
The fact is, conflicts in the Middle East have turned the region into an organ trafficking hotspot. With war raging on from Libya to Yemen to Syria, the growing population of the displaced and dispossessed, which amounts to more than 5 million, are easy prey for organ traffickers. Before the coronavirus pandemic, the red market, as it is referred to, generated between $600 million and $1.7 billion a year, according to the Washington-based think tank Global Financial Integrity. The International Organization for Migration, IOM, reported its suspicions of organ trafficking in Syria as early as 2015. Flagged as yet another hotspot for organ trafficking, Libya is another country the Emiratis have a strong presence in. The country is a hub for refugees coming from other parts of Africa who seek asylum in Europe. In both Syria and Libya, as well as in Yemen, which the same disturbing reports are coming out of, Abu Dhabi has been a bad player that accounts for much of the war, with all its concomitant sufferings. Moreover, the kafala system in the UAE, which gives employers a great degree of control over workers, increases workers' vulnerability to a wide range of exploitation, including organ trafficking. According to the U.S. Department of State, which is ironically on intimate terms with Abu Dhabi, the government of the United Arab Emirates, UAE, does not fully meet the minimum standards for the elimination of trafficking. The UAE is widely recognized as a notorious center of modern slavery, and its warming relations with a regime which has formed when it comes to organ trafficking bodes ill. Their ugly alliance would make the already intricate, shady network of organ trafficking more complicated and more sinister.
لجميع السعوديين.